I have the privilege to read some scriptures and then pray for you. And these are the passages of scripture that Scott has set aside for today. From Psalms 23, 1-6 in the Message. God, my shepherd, I don't need a thing. You have bedded me down in lush meadows. You find me quiet pools to drink from. True to your word, you let me catch my breath and send me in the right direction. Even when the way goes through death's valley, I'm not afraid when you walk at my side. Your trusty shepherd's crook makes me feel secure. You serve me a 6-course dinner right in front of my enemies. You revive my drooping head, my cup brims with blessing. Your beauty and love chase after me every day of my life, and I'm back home in the house of God for the rest of my life. Mark chapter 1, verse 35, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. And Psalms 46:10 says this, be still and know that I am God. As Scott brings this message, I know that I've known him for 33 years, 30 plus years, and this is a message I know that you've been working through for a lot of time. And so we'll just bow our heads and pray and just ask God to be here. Lord, I thank you so much for Scott and his heart. I thank you so much that the words that he is sharing today are not words that he is just sort of used ChatGPT or something to put together, but God, that they're ones that he's wrestled through, that he's walked alongside walks along you, with you in his journey to come to this place. And I ask that you take the next while for us to also set our hearts in a posture where we are not just listening to Scott, but that we're listening to you. May you use him, Lord, to bless us, help instruct us, help us understand more about your nature and your call for our lives. We just ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Thanks, son. So, as you've been introduced, my name is Scott. Scott Peters is the name. And I get to speak today. Normally, I'm the one that sits behind the soundboard. I'm one of the reasons why Ruth and others have to give you the warning about hearing protection, so I'm sorry. There's a bunch of other things that I do around here. I'm not saying what I do to brag or to say, look at how important Scott is, but it'll fit in a little bit here as we talk about getting ripped. There's a whole bunch of these crazies down here that yes, you, Sam, that I get to work with on a regular basis, that I'm involved in our young adults group. I'm involved in our worship team. I don't get to play all that often anymore, but I get to be a part of the sound team. I'm part of the foundations group that gets to teach, and we dig in a little deeper into scripture and some of those kinds of things, which actually starts today. So if you're interested in digging in a little deeper, go see Foundations. It's over at our other building. And then obviously, every once in a while, I preach. So why do I talk about all of the busyness? How and why do we oftentimes, when we meet somebody new, introduce ourselves by what we do? It's going to be a little bit of what we talk about and we dig in today. So I want to tell you a little bit about how and why I got up here, or I'm here today. And it started off with me receiving an email sometime kind of early August. It was something that was sent out by Linda, and it went something like this. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for willing to speak on Sundays. We've had such an awesome summer, and so many messages have been spoken. The Lord's heart for... I was one of those. Okay. The Lord has spoke for his people. It's been so awesome. We're having a planning meeting to discuss an overview on Tuesday, September 3rd at 6:30 at the office to plan and to pray for our upcoming series over the next couple of months leading into Christmas. I know you don't want to think about cold and ice and snow, but let's think about the good things. food, family, friends, fellowship with Christ. So let us know if you could make it. So September 3rd, I'm sitting in the church office with a room full of people. It's pretty exciting, it's kind of everyone's amped up, they're ready to go. And what had happened with that email was also sent out a list of sort of the topics, the things and the places that we were hoping to go to in this coming year. And we were told to be prayed up, to be ready to discuss, to kind of pick and choose as a group where the messages fit and ultimately where we felt God was leading to speak. And as I read through the list, I kind of went through and had some thoughts, some ideas. I prayed into a couple of the topics, and I thought I had a pretty good idea of where I would be going with the preaching schedule, or at least that's what I thought. That was my mistake. So anyways, we kind of prayed, we talked a little bit about, and then the free-for-all happened. You don't believe me? Rachel and, no, I won't. I'd have to confess and do what Jacob said, and when you blow up the meetings, I was going to say that we had brothers and sisters fighting over messages and sermon topics, and it wasn't quite that bad, but I won't say that, Rachel. That would be mean. For you to say that you and Clay got into fisticuffs wasn't entirely true. Although, in a recent one, I could see the two of you, you should take. Anyways, it was a great time of excitement, of anticipation, where people came prayed up and ready to go. And as the evening wore along and the things were picked and the people were excited and said why, I was kind of quiet. I didn't say a whole lot. And a couple of the topics that I thought I should be speaking on kind of went, but there was a check in my heart that I didn't grab those things or speak up. And as we kind of went through Christmas, and it's just like, oh boy, we're running out of topics, and Scott, you're here, you probably should step up. We were getting to the area we were talking about the spiritual disciplines. And for me, it's kind of a place of comfort a little bit. I've studied it through Bible school. I've preached on it in the past. I've studied and led small group stuff and done lessons on it. So I was thinking things like study and things like prayer and the good ones. And those went really, really quick. And then it came down to, I think it was you and me, Frankie. It was like giving and silence and solitude. Silence and solitude. Like, Frankie grabbed at least one that she's kind of an expert at. She's a bookkeeper, finance. You remember my explanation of all the things I'm involved in. Silence and solitude is not really one of those things that comes to me naturally. If it was the spiritual discipline of hamster wheel, of staying constantly busy, of sitting down and going, oh, I could teach with expertise on that one. So I was kind of hemming and hawing, and I think it was Frank, said, hey, Scott, you've been pretty quiet. What are you thinking? And I was in my head going, don't make eye contact, go away, just stop. And I'm like, well, spiritual disciplines was something I was thinking about. And I guess I could tackle silence and solitude. And as soon as that came out of my mouth, it was like, oh no. And then Jody, yes, this is perfect for you, Scott. I like it. Sign him up. I don't think that's embellishing too much. I don't think I have to confess. But that was, and then shortly after that, we kind of came through our teaching schedule, and we kind of came to an end. And I remember on my ride home thinking to myself, well, Scott, once again, what have you got yourself into? Silence and solitude is not something, for me, by nature, comes easily. When we talk about the Mary and Martha, and who's the one that's going to be quiet and sit, and the one who's going to be busy and active, typically, I'm the one who prefers the busy and active. But one of the things that I love about this church, and I love about the way we go about doing things, is we're not afraid to put challenges in front of people. We're not afraid to challenge people with things that they may not be comfortable with, but it's something that we want to grow, we want to move forward, we want to expand. And as we journey with Christ, we're called to evaluate our lives. We're called to take a hard look every once in a while, or actually on a regular basis, pick up our cross and follow Christ. So that was 7 months ago that topic kind of came up, and I was gifted with it. And it's been something that's been chewing in the back of my mind for a long time, and actually it goes back much further than just 7 months ago, because I don't know if you guys remember when I talked in the summer, it was about peace. And peace, silence, and solitude oftentimes go hand in hand. So oftentimes when I think about silence and solitude, or at least when I think about having to stop, slow down, ground, it brings a sense of anxiety, or at least a sense of discomfort. I don't like it. And sometimes my mind goes to, or it feels like I don't know how many of you have ever done any kind of study on some of the early church, some of the monastics, some of those kind of people that wandered off into the wilderness to kind of become experts in the idea of silence and solitude. Anyone? Anyone nerdy like? A few of us. Good job. Mike? We should probably get you to come up and talk about all. But anyways, so for some of you, for those of you who haven't, it's kind of an interesting study into people that are kind of a little bit on the bizarre side. And I'm not suggesting this is the way we go about doing silence and solitude, but these are some people that really took this idea or concept of silence and getting away seriously. There's this guy named Simon of Stylites. He lived for over 37 years in various places on pillars. So literally 10, 15, 20, they think that the tallest one he actually lived on could be upwards of 50, 60 feet tall. He spent his entire life there in contemplation, in silence, and then every once in a while he'd teach from above, but he took it getting away from the world seriously. We have other individuals throughout the world or throughout church history that got away, that pulled away from society and were able to take time to study, to pray, to glean, and do some of the things. They say one of the reasons why Christianity survived some of the different barbarian attacks were some of the things, the takeovers happened because we had these monastics that pulled away into these weird sort of set apart ways that they couldn't be found. And that's where a lot of our biblical record, a lot of our church history is stored because of these people pulling back, getting away. Now, I'm not suggesting that we are called to that kind of a ministry. That being said, somebody in this room could be being called by God to pull way back, to study deeply, to pray deeply, to invest in that way. But if that's not how most of us are being called, what does it look like to live a life that includes silence and solitude as a regular part of their practice? Earlier, Ruth read from Psalm 46, "Be still and know that I'm God." Now, there's different ways that you can take that passage, and I think sometimes, for me, as a kid who was oftentimes scolded for not listening and not for paying attention and being too active, it felt a little bit more like God saying, shut up, sit down, pay attention, you're doing X, Y, and Z, listen and do things right. But as we dig in and we listen, and as we hear, we talk about silence and solitude today, that is not that is not the place that God is coming from. He wants us to slow down. He wants to hear us. he wants us to slow down and listen, because he's got a message for us that's very counterculture. If you were to poll popular culture today and say, what makes a person most valuable? What makes a person intrinsically good? You'd probably hear things like results. You'd hear things like, we value growth. We value activity. We value influence. Those are all things that we do. They're all things that on the outward make us look important, that make us feel like we're doing something good. But Psalm 46 tells us something very different. Be still and know me. Your value doesn't come from your actions. It doesn't come from your influence. It doesn't come from your results. You're valued because you're a child of God. And unless we stop on a regular basis, unless we slow down, we're probably never actually going to get to hear that voice. Not in a clear, concise, or really audible kind of way. The first point that I kind of want to make, and trying to figure out how to consolidate all of this stuff into kind of neat points, is a little bit tough. But the first thing I want to talk about today when it comes to silence and solitude is this idea of restoration before power. So the idea that in relationship, we find restoration. In silence and solitude, this is a way in which we can pull away and hear something really important. Actually, I just jumped ahead. There's my ADD going and jumping ahead. Let me back up a little bit. Sorry, guys. It's not restoration before power. It's actually relationship before results. And these are all interchangeable. Now, as we look at the patterns of Jesus, I think it's often easy for us to begin to think about what he does, and when we look at the ways he goes about doing things, we can misunderstand how and why he did what he did. As we look at these different things, we're going to use Jesus as an example of him pulling away on a regular basis for some specific reasons. I think sometimes when we look at Jesus' life as an example, we look at him doing things, and he's doing those things because they're good for us. Have you ever heard that Jesus did this or said this as an example for how we are to live our lives? We can watch him and get a great example. And while that's true, I think it's easy for us to miss something that's really, really important. At least it's me, and maybe I'm a little bit in my head, but I think this is important for us to grab. Jesus did what he did, not because it was an example of something good for us to do. What he did and what he practiced was good. I think sometimes we think when we look at these practices of discipline, we can see this as something that we have to take on. It's like putting on a pair of clothes where you're kind of living life, you're kind of doing your thing, and now we have a message talking about getting right ripped. And now I got to put something on. It's like another piece of clothing. I got to put on prayer. I've got to put on giving. I've got to put on study. I've got to put on silence and solitude. Christ did what he did because it was who he was. He didn't get away and was quiet, and he wasn't silent. He didn't get before his Father because it was something he should do. It's because if he didn't, he'd stop being himself. It's like losing an arm. You don't put an arm on. It's supposed to be part of who we are. And as we talk and think about silence and solitude and any of the disciplines, I'm hoping that is the tack we take. It's not something we put on to add to our life and add to our week or add to our month or year. It is about revealing and reclaiming who we are. That if we don't have some of these practices in our lives, we're never fully us. We're never fully who we meant to be. So I think the first thing that we remember, or will be helped remember, when we practice this idea of silence and solitude is truly that relationship comes before results. Jesus, on a regular basis, got away. He got away from the crowds. He got away from the people. He got away from all of those things. And it was about getting in tune with his Father. It was getting in tune of who he truly was. And it was that connection with his Father. It wasn't about, yes, he had a mission. He had a plan. He had things that he came to do. But before results, before influence, before all of the outward things that we see, Jesus understood that I need to meet with the Father. I need to remember who I am. And yes, he was perfect. But if he did it, how much more important in our lives is it to get away and to remember it's not what I do. It's not how well Scott preaches Sunday morning that makes him valuable, although he wants to do a good job and put in the work, hopefully, to do that. It's the fact that I spent time with the Father, listening, hearing, what do you want me to say? Unless we're away from the busyness, away from the influence of performance at work, performance at home, performance of the kids, performance, you can, wherever. Unless you stop and are silent and are quiet and you get away, you're never going to hear that voice because our world is so incredibly loud. The second thing that we learn about ourselves, and hopefully we'll rediscover as we begin to look at this practice and dig into the practice of silence and solitude, is restoration needs to come before power. You see, Jesus' ministry was full of all sorts of people needs. He healed the sick, he cast out demons, he taught, he confronted religious leaders, and he drew back not to escape. I want us to really understand this too. As we've been talking about these spiritual disciplines, this is not, we step back to hide. We don't step back to get away. We don't step back to avoid. Much like fasting, we don't eat to take that time to spend doing something else intentional. So when Jesus stepped back, when he got away with his Father, it was about restoration. But it wasn't restoration so he could do whatever he wanted, so he could just kind of kick back and have something go easy. It was that he could recharge for the next sending out. For us, this means that the more we pour into others, the more we need to step away to be refined by God, to be recharged by God, and to again remember the first one. I'm not my results. I'm not my influence. I am a child. And it's in that time alone that we can begin to recharge, that we can begin to find that restoration in our lives. There's something for me about stopping and being silent that means I give up control. You see, for me, my hamster wheel is always going. At work, my responsibility is operations manager, but to just help me remember what I'm supposed to do, they added an extra term in front of my name. It's strategic operations manager. So I'm always, and this is the way my brain works, I'm always thinking, okay, what about, looking at all the different aspects of the business I'm a part of, and it's just always going, if I'm not careful. The idea of being silent and pulling away in solitude means that I give up my control over thinking about the future, thinking about the next thing, about all of the things that my mind usually would go to. It's a reminder that it's not me who's in control. Ultimately, the results that my time and my efforts put in need to be based out of the power, the authority, and the gifting that God has given me. And if I remember that and stop, that's a tough place to be. Luke 14:28-30 says this, and there's no reference for this, guys, so don't try and find it. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay a foundation and are not able to finish it, won't everyone who sees it ridicule and say, this person began to build and it wasn't able to be finished? I think oftentimes when we look at this passage, we see it from a financial setting. We put on the financial controller or the bookkeeper and say, okay, do I have enough money to build this house? But for this morning, I'd like us to look at this a little bit more from a physical or a spiritual perspective. How often do we start ministries? How often do we start working with people? How often do we start endeavors that we go in with great intention, but we run out of steam, we run out of excitement, we run out of the willpower to push through, to get through the tough things, to see the results, to see the good things happen. And I think sometimes that is on us because we haven't taken the time to get away, to be restored, to be empowered, to be given vision for the next step. And that's not a guilt trip, but this was something that Jesus regularly did. It's why he was able to do what he did with the effort that he did it. And I think it's something that we can learn, and I've been learning over the years. Last one I want to focus on, because there's so much we could cover. In my teacher brain, I could have dove down so many different rabbit trails. The last one is retreat before action. And all of these are kind of interconnected. They're kind of the same, but all have different purposes. The idea of retreat before action is getting a vision and a plan for what happens next. Because you can be healed up, you can be empowered, but if you don't know what to put the power to, you end up running in 100 different directions, kind of like me sometimes. Jesus took time to retreat into solitude before making any major decision. I don't know if you've noticed this, but as you read through Scripture, Jesus retreated into solitude before choosing the disciples, before facing the cross, before he preached, before he healed, before he got into some of the biggest conflicts in his ministry. You'll notice that morning, Jesus pulled away, or Jesus got into a boat and went to the other side. It's this idea that when we retreat, we get our marching orders. When we retreat, we can hear from God. And Alex and I were chatting a little bit before the service, and he pulled half my message out of me. And one of the things that we talked about a little bit there was this idea that we sometimes forget of how important it is when we get away to be silent when we pray. This idea that oftentimes prayer for us and for me, it becomes this blah of all the things that God already knows. And there's nothing wrong with us giving to God the things that burden us. But the idea of silence and solitude is allowing us, or allowing God, the time to download to us. And as we contemplate and what Jesus did, I think that's part of what he did. So, how do we start? Where do we go? Where do we as believers take this? Because I know for some of us, silence is not easy. Solitude's not easy. You can't pick a worse topic to talk about because it doesn't work. The voices inside the head take over, all of those kinds of things. For those of you who guys are readers, or even for those of you who aren't, I'd like to recommend a book that helped me in my journey probably 10 to 15 years ago that I read. The author's name is Mark Buchanan. And the book's called Spiritual Rhythms. And the book for me, in many ways, was the first time it felt like somebody gave me permission to stop running. Overall, the premise of the book is that we as believers, we as Christians go through cycles, we go through seasons, and each of those seasons are designed to do different things in our life. He equates the spiritual rhythms with kind of the cycle of the earth, where in spring it's time for growth. In summer it's kind of time for this going. Fall is time for harvest. Winter is timing for stepping back and renewal. And as he went through, bit by bit by bit, for me it was like, that's why I'm exhausted. That's why. And becoming more and more, the challenge was to become in tune and recognizing what the seasons you're in and how to appropriately and properly address the needs of that season. And this wasn't something that it was a finger wag, it was permission to say, no, I actually need this. This is something that's good for me. It's something that Christ did. And then one of the things that they did as part of the book was beginning to point out, how are you or how are we as believers creating times in our calendars and creating spaces in our lives that allow for us to retreat? And it was, when I read the book, it was kind of like this light went off. Now, I can't say I was really good at applying all of the things in this book, but over the years, but it was one of those things that triggered, okay, every single year, our world shuts down. Without winter, you can't have spring. There are certain things that Ruth's been planting like a little madwoman, seeds and all sorts of things, and she was so stoked earlier this week that she had some tomato plants or tomatoes that she left, nasty shriveled up things in our little garden in our sunroom, and they are growing within, like, was it 2 days planting? The cool thing about certain kinds of seeds is that without cold and silence and dark, not silence, but you understand, but without that, they're not capable of germinating. They need, and it's an example that we, kind of like seeds, without certain times, we need this. So it was a part of a journey that I've gone on and begin to recognize, why do I long for certain times of the year? It's because I get away. For me, that's the fall. It's getting out in the bush. It's getting out on a river. It's pulling away. There's other things that we have set up in our lives. And how many of you have been to our backyard before? There's been a few of you here. How many of you have sat on the swings? There's a lot of, how many people are we feeding? Because Ruth can't have people on the swings without feeding you. Sorry, squirrel. When I started the project of building those swings, my main intent was trying to provide a place for my wife to stay at home so she wouldn't spend so much gas money going to the beach in the summer. Not entirely true. But I knew it was getting harder and harder for her to get away because some of the health stuff. And as I began to dig those foundations, I began to pray and prayed over the things that this would become a place of peace for her and for us and for the people that we would have over in the future. That I knew that lots of times there was an ability, because I was coming home from a crazy day at work, quickly scarfing down some food, and then off to young adults, worship, foundations meetings, blah, blah, all the different things. But there was things in my life that I needed to be able to find a place where there was silence and there was solitude, even if it was in a very short term. And I think for us, or for me anyways, those swings have become one of those places that I can come home from a crazy, stressful day, I can grab Ruth, or I can just go by myself, I sit down, I swing back and forth for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and it's like, I don't know if you've ever walked into a room that's really, really deadened, like a recording studio where you walk in the room and as soon as you walk in, it's just dead. It's quiet. And I think those are the places that we need to be working on. You don't have to build swings, but we need to set up places in our lives, in our homes, that in a very quick place, they give us the ability to, as soon as you walk in. Scripture refers it to, I think, as a prayer room. This place where you sit down and instantly it's like, I'm quiet. I'm ready to listen. So in the time remaining, what time is it? Did I do good? 15 minutes. Yes. I usually have way too much stuff and never have enough time for any of the practical stuff because I just went, You know Grace, right? Yeah. So what I'd like to do is for the next 5 to 10 minutes to give us some time to be quiet. Now, in our prayer time earlier, the team up top was challenging me or saying, I dare you to step up on stage and then introduce the topic and then just not say anything for like 3, 5, 10 minutes, just stare at you. It would have been so good, but for some of us, that would have been so awful, right? Like the hamster would have just gone berserk. So what I'd like to do is give us some time now. You've heard some things. You heard some things about the way Jesus did things, why he got away. You've hopefully heard a little bit about how we were designed to be, and even maybe challenged with some practical things. What do you need to do today or begin to plan for today to create spaces, whether it's time in your season? And the recommendation is once a year, getting away for a longer period of time. Once a month, getting away for maybe a shorter periods of time. Once a week, and then even on a daily rhythm. What kinds of rhythms are you setting yourself up so that you can be whole? Because this is not supposed to be a practice that you take on. It's supposed to be something that reveals who we are. So there's a slide up here that I want us to take some time with. What are some things that maybe the Holy Spirit is revealing to you, ways that you can incorporate what we've learned today? So the idea is yearly, monthly, weekly, daily. What are some practices that you can do? And I understand we're all coming from different points in our lives. Some of you guys are parents with young kids, and this is impossible. Or it feels impossible. I'm not talking you have to become like one of the desert fathers who gets away for 35 years. But what are some of the things you can practice? And then the other flip side, the other slide will be identify some spaces that resonate with you and encourage solace and quiet. Are there places or spaces in your life right now that when you walk into, it's like, oh, that's a great place to start. So I'm going to stop talking now. We're going to put some music on, because I think if it was just absolute silence, that would probably be a little bit too much for some of us. So I'm going to relieve the pressure a little bit. But music without words, so you don't get caught up in the words of the songs. Take some time to pray, to think, and to invest. And this might be the first time in a long time you've actually taken the time to be quiet and slow down. And if this is something that's not for you, sit still anyways. It's not going to hurt you. Yes, your kids do need to get picked up, but you still have 12 minutes. Don't get them yet. And just for those who are wondering, I will pray, which will mean we're at an end. I almost hate to break the silence. This feels like for many of us, it's a holy moment. But for some of us here today, you've probably been sitting in quiet and going, I'm not getting anything. It's silent. That's okay. It's called practice of silence and solitude for a reason. Sometimes it takes a while to break through the noise and the chaos of your brain. 2 years ago, I took some time at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, to get away. And originally it was supposed to be a fishing trip. I was supposed to go down to the coast to be with my dad, and that didn't work out. So I had already booked the time, so I decided to take some time away. And I had lots of things to do at the house, so I kind of told Ruth, I'm going to get away for a couple of days, and then I'll be back in work. And I was out there for the first day, and I had the best campsite ever because it had everything that it needed. Not because it had it when I started, but because I was just running at 100 miles an hour. And I was working, and I was doing, and all of those things. And then day 2 came around, and I was running at 100 miles an hour. And I kind of called home and said, I think I might just take one more day. And Ruth's like, yeah, stay. She knew I needed it. And but nothing was coming. And I was busy. I was running, doing things. And called back the next day. I think I need one more day. I think I was there. Was it 5 days, hon? For me, and the way my brain and the way my life worked, it took me 3 days to kind of wind down enough. And in the 4th and the 5th days, as I sat, and it was probably the night of the 4th, as I was staring into a fire, kind of in that semi kind of quiet, captivated by the flames, that God began to download some things for me that I needed to work on. He also downloaded some things to me that I needed to say, and prepared me for some other things that I didn't know was coming. I say that not to say, hey, look how good Scott was, but it's worth the effort. It's worth the discipline. It's worth breaking through the craziness of what's going on in your minds. Some of you don't like being quiet because you hear the accuser. Sometimes you don't like being quiet because you are being reminded of the things that you didn't get to. And other times you're hearing, you're just not quite measuring up. Remember what we started off this morning with. Be still and know that I am God. That is the God that made you and is calling you into a relationship. Yeah, he's going to have some things that you need to work on. He's going to have some things in your character that need refining. But first and foremost, he longs and desires a relationship with you, to remind you of why you're good, of why you're important, and why you are valuable. It's because you're his. So I think that's kind of, for me, the journey I've been on, and why quiet and solitude is hard, because the enemy doesn't want that message to get through. How better way of keeping a people busy, or keeping a people not listening to the Father, by keeping us busy and afraid of what's going on in our minds. So my challenge is to you is, yeah, you got 10 minutes to do some homework, but take some time this week. Let this get deep into your bones, as it has in mine. It's often been an uncomfortable conversation I've had to have with myself, but it's been a good one. Let me pray.